Welcome, everybody, to an all-new episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Thank you so much for joining us as we take our weekly look at everything going on in the world of combat sports. There is a lot to talk about this week. We had three different cards in three different disciplines of combat sports, and all had some sort of controversy last weekend. That's right. It was action-packed, and there's a lot to talk about because there's going to be a lot of debate about how things went down, how things were finished, how things were stopped, if people should have kept going. All these things were brought up last weekend on the broadcast for these fights, and we're going to get into it all of it here on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Of course, you have that boxing match for the heavyweight title between Parker and Wardley. We'll discuss the controversial stoppage there. UFC 321. You had two titles on the line. You had Aspinall versus Gane for the heavyweight title, where there was an unfortunate incident and one guy could not continue. Was it the right call? Should people give him the gruff about not getting in there and continuing the fight? Or was it the right play for everybody involved? And we'll also talk about the women crowning a new champion, as that was a great 5-round battle in that one, as well as the rest of that main card. We'll also hit on BKFC 83 in Italy, where there was two big fights that both had controversy. Both main and co-main fights had split decisions. And if I didn't hate split decisions enough as it is, I went against the judges on both of those. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about the judges. If we thought it was right, obviously we did not. And we'll debate why and talk about all things going on in that main card as well for BKFC 83 over in Italy. Through all this, I'm going to put out another call for transparency. I know I did it last week. I did not plan to do it this week, but with all the drama we had, there is something that needs to change in combat sports, even more so than what we just talked about last week. And we're going to point it out here later on the show. And we'll even talk about a possible rematch, a decade in the making, that I don't think anybody wants. I didn't hear anybody calling for. Should we have this fight? We'll get into all that while also touching on and previewing slightly the two fight nights we have in the UFC and BKFC this weekend. All that coming up. No matter where you're following the show, whether it is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe so every time we put out a new episode, comes right into your notifications there. And follow us on all social medias. On X, we're at Fighting Lines. At Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, we're at Fighting Lines Pod. Make sure you interact with the show, send us some messages, let us know what you think of what we're doing. And also make sure you give us those reviews on those sites so we can keep trying to climb up into those rankings, and tell your friends, tell your family, tell everyone you know to check out Fighting Lines Pod. All right, let's get right into all the controversy we had last weekend in combat sports, starting with the boxing world. As we talked about, there was a heavyweight battle over in the UK between Joseph Parker and Fabio Wardley for Parker's WBO heavyweight interim title championship, and maybe a shot at Usyk, who, of course, was supposed to fight one of these guys, but unfortunately had some injuries, was sitting out. Who knows if he's going to be back? Because, he's been flirting with the BKFC, with the BKB, all these bare knuckle organizations he seemed to have meetings with. So he's going to come back and defend these titles. We'll find out. Does Tyson Fury come out of retirement? Does, some of these other guys like an Anthony Joshua get involved with these guys? We will see. All that was going to be left up, of course, to the future. But in the present, last week was the fight at the O2 Arena in London between these two heavyweights, and to see who was going to hold on to that interim title. Wardley was coming in, the 30-year-olds from England, with 19-0-1 with 18 KOs. He had a fight right before that where he was getting outboxed by Honey. He was getting beat up, and then all of a sudden pulled out the late KO. Parker, the 33-year-old from New Zealand, was coming in at 36-3 with 24 KOs. He was on a 6-fight win streak. He was our pick to get the win. We thought he was going to get the win. We thought he was going to get it by decision or points, and it certainly seemed like we were heading that way as we continued to go through the fight. The end result, Wardley gets the 11th round TKO win over Parker to take his title and put himself in the mix with the big boys. I don't understand it. Now, as I've watched it more and more, I've tempered my frustration a little bit. I was adamant about this on Saturday that I couldn't believe this happened. This was complete bull. This is ridiculous. What a horrible stoppage. Not as bad as I thought it was, but still bad now. Because when you look at it, Parker was still standing. He did not go down once in the whole fight. Was he in trouble? Sure, he was up against the ropes. And Wardley was throwing some big shots at him. Half more than even landing, okay? So it's not like this guy was getting his brain knocked around for 3, 5, 10 minutes. This guy was getting knocked around for maybe 30 seconds to a minute, and most of those weren't even landing. So a big part of having a situation where you stop the fight is you got to protect the guy from himself and from the other combatant if he's not doing it. What's the big thing they say is fight back. Well, right before the ref jumped in there, Parker threw 2 or 3 punches and then went back against the ropes and then was ducking and dodging and diving. He was, doing all the D's of dodgeball, but the guy was still in the fight. He didn't go down, didn't drop to a knee, never went down the whole fight, and the ref jumps in there. He's the champ. You got to give the guy the chance to survive. And I know that you're not supposed to necessarily give more deference to anybody in the fight. It's supposed to be even. But we all know that we're all human, and you don't cut the champ off and not give him the chance to keep going when a guy has not gotten down to the mat. Not to mention that, the guy was also ahead in the fight. All three judges had it in a situation where Wardley was not winning at that point. Now, one of them had it 98-92, Parker up by 6. One of them had him, Parker, up by 2 at 96-94. One of them had it 95-95 at the stoppage. That in itself is just ridiculous. But we can get into that in a minute. But they stopped the fight. If you watch the fight, to me, Parker won rounds 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. That's right, he won the round right before the one that the ref stops it in. Wardley had 2, 7, and 8, and was going to win 11, okay? So to me, by my scoring, Parker's going to be up 3 rounds going into the final round. So short of Wardley starting to drop him to the mat or getting the knockout, Parker was going to be able to cruise, or at least survive, to a victory. So the ref jumping in there just completely negates all that. The guy put in his work. Round 1, he was putting on Wardley early on. Round 2, Wardley came back, had Parker against the ropes, was landing some good shots like he did in that 11th round, but round 3 was close. I still gave it to Parker. 4, 5, 6. Parker was coming forward. He was landing more. He was the better fighter. Wardley had some good shots in the 7, landed big shots at one point, was just enough to maybe offset Parker coming forward and take that round. 8, Wardley was pushing him back a little bit, landing some solid jabs to the head and the body, but it wasn't anything that was dangerous. 9, Parker attacked again. He was coming forward. He was being the aggressor. He had Wardley against the ropes, was landing some good shots. 10, things were interesting because Parker was winning that round, and I think eventually won that round. But towards the end of it, Wardley only didn't get someone against the ropes. There was a few good shots at the very end of the round. I don't think that changes the round. I think he still won it, Parker. I still think that he was up, a handful of rounds there. And then he gets to the 11th. Wardley didn't do much in the first minute, then all of a sudden caught him 1 minute in. Parker got a cut by his eye, started backing up against the ropes. That's where he was playing more defensive. That's where he was trying to recover, avoiding the big shots, eventually landing a couple shots of his own and striking back, which should have been enough to save him and keep him from getting that fight stopped. Instead, the ref jumps in. It wasn't like this guy was getting pummeled for a whole round or 2 rounds or 3 rounds. It was 10, 15 seconds of the 10th round, a little bit in the 2nd round, and about a minute of the 11th round. The guy should have gotten a chance to recover. The guy shouldn't have gotten a chance to continue. Instead, the ref jumps in, and it was just complete ridiculousness to me. Parker was up 4 rounds going into that 11th round. So you got to know the guy's winning the fight. You're not scoring it as a judge, but you have a sense of how things are going. It wasn't that long of a beatdown. I mean, maybe he was thinking about the 10th round too, but even that was a short-lived point of the round. It's not like the whole 10th round, whole 11th round where you're trying to save this guy. He was avoiding the biggest shots. He was moving. You always hear the ref get in there say, defend yourself, fight back, defend yourself. Well, isn't avoiding shots, isn't part of boxing, getting out of the way of the other punches, moving your head, doing that kind of defensive stance that he was doing? It's not the best way to win a fight, but it certainly is you still fighting, you still being involved in the fight. But the ref jumped in there. He wouldn't go down. He wasn't against the ropes falling. None of that. Parker was still in that fight, and I thought it was ridiculous that the ref jumped in there and stopped that fight. I think it's even more ridiculous that one of the refs had it 95-95. Now, obviously, Wardley is the guy from the UK, and that is just some crappy judging right there in his favor. Maybe some things here or there that could have changed a round or two in the eyes of a ref for one reason or another, but I still don't have it even any stretch of the imagination. And I definitely don't have it being stopped just because the guy landed some good punches, because most of his punches were not landing. Most of them were missing, hitting gloves, missing the head as Parker ducked, and you got to give the guy a chance to continue, especially that late to a fight. It's not like he's getting pummeled in the 4th, 5th, 6th round where he has a whole half a fight to still take these shots. He had the last 4 more minutes. 1 minute in that round and 3 minutes in the last one, and it's the end of the fight. Premature stoppage by the ref. I don't like it. I like it a little less than I did that night, but I still don't like it. I still think it was bull, and Parker got his belt taken. He wasn't that upset about it. He seemed to kind of be like, hey, it was a great fight, and he was better, but I don't agree. He should still be the champ, and we should at least get a rematch of that one before one of these guys takes on the big boys. Now, of course, the card that everybody was most looking forward to last weekend was UFC 321 over there in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, the pay-per-view card where the heavyweights were going to be fighting for the title as well as the women's featherweight. was a good card for us overall. We gave a bunch of bets for this one, had 2 picks that unfortunately were knocked off the board because of how things ended. And that, of course, was in that controversial main event. The heavyweight battle between Tom Aspinall, who is the champion, and Ciryl Gane, the former interim heavyweight champion. Of course, both these guys were coming off long layups for both the 35-year-old from France and Gane, as well as Aspinall, the 32-year-old from the UK. They're kind of left in limbo because Gane was coming in as the possible next guy to face the champion, and Aspinall was the interim champion, was trying to wait for John Jones, but he was playing patty cake with the UFC, dragging them along, playing games with the organization and with this title. What was he going to do? Will he fight Aspinall? Won't he? Didn't think he should fight for him, was going to fight somebody else, but then decided he wasn't going to fight at all and retired, and now says he's unretired. He wants to fight Alex Pereira at the White House. So with all his ridiculous stuff going on, once he said, I'm retired, Dana said, all right, we're done. Thanks. Appreciate everything. Aspinall, you are now not the interim champ, but the actual heavyweight champ. And he finally got to defend this belt after a long layoff. I think it was 14 months since we last saw him fight. Gane was, pretty similar. It was at the end of last year that we saw him last. So both these guys have been on the bench waiting to find out what was going on and finally get to match up against each other. So much hype, so much anticipation. Was Aspinall going to go right through Gane like Jones and Ngannou had done? Or was Gane going to be able to drag this into some deep waters? He's a guy who's gone over 14 minutes on average time in his fights. Aspinall, he finished using the first 2, or at least the first round. So how was that going to go as we got into this fight? Aspinall, the big favorite at almost 5-1. We liked him. We thought he was going to win the fight at minus 460. I had him by KO TKO in the first 3 rounds at plus 110. Both of those get voided, though, because we don't even get out of the first round, end up with a no contest because of 2 little things. Boop. Because of the old Three Stooges move that Ciryl Gane ends up pulling in this fight. Now, it happens 4 minutes, 35 seconds in. He was warned twice about the fingers. And this has been a problem in MMA for a long time. People keep talking about the gloves. The UFC tried to bring in new gloves over the last year. Design that's going to kind of curve the fingers down, make fighters not put their fingers out and get each other in the eyes, but fighters didn't like it, so they abandoned it. So now we end up with the same gloves we had and back to the same problems of guys poking each other in the eye. Gane was warned about it twice, and 3rd time's a charm because when he actually lands them, he not only lands once, but twice, both fingers, both eyes, fight over because Tom Aspinall can no longer see. Now, there's plenty of people having their theories on it. People are hating on Aspinall saying, why didn't you continue? Some of them are complaining that, he told the ref, I can't see. And once they do that, they're going to stop the fight. They're not going to wait the 5 minutes. Did you see the pictures of the guy afterwards? Did you see him in the cage there talking to Daniel Cormier? He couldn't see. Why should he not say that? The guy poked him in the eye and didn't poke him with 1 finger, 1 eye and just kind of catch it. 2 fingers, 2 eyes. One of them was knuckle deep. So I don't blame Tom Aspinall at all. Gane did have a great start to the fight. He busted up Aspinall's nose a little bit, but Aspinall returned fire as well. He was finding himself. Both these guys had ring rust. So it's not surprising that, there was a back and forth and it wasn't just one guy dominating. But now people coming out and saying afterwards that Tom Aspinall should have tried to keep fighting, or, blaming him, trying to cop out, saying that he had a little bit of adversity with Gane and didn't want any more of this and use it as a way to get out of the fight. That's complete crap, and I don't want to hear it. Watch the video. Go try it on yourself if you think you're so tough and you can do it. The guy's in there in a cage match, in a UFC heavyweight fight, taking shots. If you can't see, I don't blame you for getting the hell out of there, especially because the guy poked both your eyes. It wasn't one eye. Maybe the vision was a little blurred and he could fight through it. He poked both his eyes. Cormier talked to him afterwards behind the scenes. The guy had his eye completely bandaged. He checked out in Abu Dhabi, went to the hospital, had to go probably get specialists check him out at home too to see how it's doing now afterwards. The guy could not see. He was in danger, and it's not on him. You want to blame somebody? Blame Ciryl Gane, okay? Because I don't care if it was accidental. I know he didn't mean to do it. Obviously, he's having a good fight, but he had been warned twice about the fingers up, about fingers forward. You can't do that. And to me, probably should have been DQ'd for it. It should have been a no contest. It should have been a disqualification. Ciryl Gane loses the fight. Because you're warned twice. Fix it. No? Instead, you not only almost poke the guy or then do poke the guy, you poke both his eyes and get deep into it. That's not a defensive move. That's not a legal strike in any sense of it. Close your fists. If you want to stop a guy on the takedown, okay, you're going to need your hands, but that's not what he was doing. He was not stopping a takedown. He poked him right in the eyes. Should have been DQ. The ref was going to take a point from Ciano Gane if the fight had continued. So forget that great round that he had that everyone said, oh, well, Aspinall was scared because Gane had some success. It would have been a wash. It would have been a 9-9 round because he would have gotten a point taken away from that because the guy was warned, kept doing it, did it worse, and ended the fight. Do I think he meant to do it? No. But you can't do that, and you got to learn, and you got to do the right thing in combat sports. And that's not the right thing. Many people have had problems with it. And lots of people saying, oh, well, it is what it is. It happens all the time. If anybody should know about what goes on in an octagon, it's Jim Miller, right? A guy who's been there more than anybody, has more fights, more wins in the history of the UFC than anybody who's ever been there. He flat out said, it's not an accident. Because even if you did not mean to do that, how come guys like him and Frankie Edgar and Clay Guida and Rafael Dos Anjos, they didn't have a problem with that. They didn't get warned for that. They don't have a bunch of marks on their record there where they are poking guys in the eyes. It's the way that guys fight. It's not about, oh, it's going to happen. You got to fight the right way. Gane didn't do it. He's the reason the fight ended, not Tom Aspinall. Aspinall couldn't see. Aspinall was the one who was fouled, and he's still the champ. So stop your crying about it. The guy did everything he could. He was pissed off. He didn't want to cop out of the fight. He waited over a year to fight. Why would he want to get out of there? Anybody blaming Aspinall is ridiculous. We also had a women's strawweight title on the line. Of course, this was a vacant belt. Zhang Weili, the badass female fighter that she is, gave it up. Decided to move up to 125 to give herself a new challenge and go against Valentina Shevchenko. I don't know why she had to give it up. And Dana doesn't like this thing of holding up belts now. So if you want to go fight a different weight class, you got to give it up and have somebody else fight. But if she loses, she's going to come right back down and try to reclaim it anyway. So what was the point of that? Instead, you get it up for grabs between Werner Jandaroba and Mackenzie Dern. The two Brazilians, of course, Dern born in America, but deep Brazilian lineage. Her father is from Brazil, spent a lot of time there. These are the 32-year-old who kind of has reinvented herself through a rough couple of years in her personal life and her fighting career. Had a 4 out of 6 losing streak before turning it around and getting things going the last couple of years, going against Jandaroba, the 37-year-old Brazilian who had a 5-fight win streak coming into this. I was leaning towards Jandaroba. She had a bigger win streak. She seemed to have really found herself late in her career here and was plus money, so why not take a chance at plus 138? But what I really liked, that I put in some of my best bets, was will the fight go the distance? Yes, minus 106, because both these BJJ practitioners like to go deep in fights. They got a lot of decisions, and that's how we ended up. We go to decision where Mackenzie Dern gets the unanimous decision, 48-47 on 2 cards, 49-46 on 1 card. It was interesting because we saw in this fight and another fight on this card, ground strikes. Strikes from being on your back, being on the ground, counting way more than they ever have in any card that I've seen in the UFC. So it worked out well for Mackenzie Dern. She looked good on her feet too, though. It wasn't just striking from the ground that she did. She had some great shots on the feet, striking looking better than it probably has in a long time, if ever, for her. She's really started to find herself on the feet a little bit more. The former BJJ champion that came in there as that prodigy on the ground has started to be able to throw some fists as well and some kicks and do some damage there and use it well against Jandaroba. But she also has some good shots of her own, and she's definitely grown in that realm as well. Both these women came in with their background in grappling and have started to find themselves on the feet. Maybe a little too late for Jandaroba in her career, but Jandaroba has some good takedowns as well, of course, as we expected that she would. And she had some time where she controlled Dern. She tried, had some chances where she tried to advance position, get submissions, things like that. But what was the big X factor in this fight was strikes from the ground, because every time that Mackenzie was on the back, she was still hitting. She was still striking. And that is something that the judges awarded way more in this fight that I've seen in a long time. That she was making sure to be active. Even when Jandaroba was trying to improve her position, even when she was trying to do other things, all the strikes that Dern landed on her, it helped her out to the credit of the judges, because Jandaroba's 9 takedowns, in most cases, would have won a fight. But Dern striking her that much from the back and trying to do other things in defense really helped her out. And it really gave her the win there. I had it 48-47 personally. I probably would have slighted towards Dern with the way the numbers shook out there. But still, I don't know, 49-46, I don't get that one. But I think that was a great fight between these two women. And it was Dern winning both. So, of course, you're not going to see a trilogy. What's next for Dern is, of course, probably Tatiana Suarez, if she has a choice. That's what she said. She brought her up. Suarez, of course, is tied for that number 1 contender spot in that division. But it all depends on this next fight between Shevchenko and Weili that we said. I mean, if Weili goes up and loses to Shevchenko, she's not going to stay at 125 probably. She's probably going to come back down and fight for her title. Makes no sense for her to go back up there, stay at that weight class, and then fight somebody else to try to work her way back up to the title when she could drop back down and get a title fight again. If Weili loses, I expect her to be the first challenge for Dern. But it was great to see her get this point in her career to get that title. It was a very emotional win for her, very emotional celebration in the cage with her father, who, of course, put her on this path with all his BJJ training and his fighting and what he's been through for her over the years, training her and getting her through these competitions, and her daughter as well, bringing her young daughter into the cage, putting the belt on her. It might have been all rosy for the two of them, but right now they're in a great spot. And she is now the champion and shared that with her daughter as well. And that was a beautiful scene to see. Then at Bantamweight, we had a battle between Umar Nurmagomedov and Mario Bautista. This is going to be an interesting fight because Bautista was on an 8-fight win streak coming in, the 32-year-old from the U.S., against Nurmagomedov, 29-year-old from Dagestan, who is coming off a loss at that title fight. Fought Dvalishvili for the title at the beginning of the year. Hadn't fought since, 18-1. That was his only loss. Can he get himself back into that title picture with a win? Well, he does. We thought he would. He was a heavy favorite. Despite Bautista's win streak, he was minus 650. We liked him by points at minus 145 because both these guys have gone to decision lately, and the book had it heavy towards it going the distance. And that's the way he wins it. So that was a nice win for all of us as he gets a unanimous decision win, 30-27 on all three judges' scorecards. Now, despite it being a 30-27, honestly, I thought that this was the type of fight where both guys come out look good. For Bautista, I think this proves that he is right there, not necessarily maybe in the title picture yet, but he's not that far away. He did a great job striking with Nurmagomedov. Landed some awesome shots on him throughout the fight. Even dropped him in the beginning of the second round with a kind of knee kick there. I'm not sure what he was going for, but Nurmagomedov was going for the takedown. So as he was coming down, he got caught. He got dropped. Had to fight off that right there against the challenger. Bautista fought off some takedowns of Nurmagomedov. Of course, he landed some of them. He was going to get to it at some point, but he fought off some of them against a guy who is very, very strong in that realm. So that shows that he has a solid ground game. He even transitioned and got out of some of those bad positions. So that showed good improvement for him there. And he even went the distance with this top contender. Now for Nurmagomedov, he stops a long winning streak of an up-and-comer. So, this guy was hot, and he shows that he's still better than him. And he also was able to recover from adversity, showed what he can do after getting rocked in that second round to recover, get back into the fight, and win it. And he uses grappling not just to get it to the ground, but also kept moving the position forward, kept landing strikes. So it wasn't a lay-and-pray situation, but he gets the victory here. He gets the decision. Now what happens for him? He is the top contender. He is coming off that title fight. Does he get another shot at the title right away? He seems to think so. He thinks he deserves it. I don't think so yet. Because obviously first we have Dvalishvili versus Jan at the end of this year. So he thinks he should get the winner of that fight. I think he needs at least one more fight. Because even though he's a top-ranked guy and everyone below him has lost in the last year to the champ, this was his first fight since losing that championship fight. So you can't come in there against a guy who was hot but was, like 7th in the division, beat him and say, okay, I deserve the title. I think if he really wants to prove he's the best, he should go fight the next guy that's hot in that division, which is Zahadi. We saw him a couple weeks ago get that win. Now he's off for a couple months with a broken arm, but you're going to be waiting on Jan and Dvalishvili fighting in December anyway. So maybe at the start of next year, you fight Zahadi versus Nurmagomedov if Zahadi doesn't get the title shot against the winner. And then if you win that one, then okay, you've dispatched everybody else and you get the next title shot. Still, like I said, I think he has one more that he has to prove that he is still the top contender, despite him having that ranking against the next up-and-comer here in Zahadi. Then at heavyweight, we talked about how ground strikes would play a big position in that Dern fight and that Dern win against Jandaroba for the title. Well, it did here as well when Alexander Volkov and Halton Almeida battled. Volkov, the 36-year-old Russian, was coming off a loss to Gane last December by split decision. Almeida, the 34-year-old Brazilian, was coming in at 8-1 in the UFC. It was going to be who kept the fight where they wanted. Volkov gets most of his wins by KO, TKO. Almeida, most of his wins by submission. I thought that eventually Almeida would get the takedowns. I thought that we'd seen Volkov, get tossed around by Blades and some others in the past. Even though he has a strong ground game, I thought Almeida was a play at minus 215. I thought he would get the sub up plus 160. And both those came back to bite us because while he does get the takedowns, he never got the sub and really did nothing with them. Volkov gets a split decision win, 29-28 on 2 cards, 28-29 on one of them. And this was one, like we said, that it was about what you did when the fight was on the ground, not just if you got it to the ground. And that's not the way judges have always done it. But it seems to be something that maybe they're focusing on, at least these judges that we saw. I mean, Almeida got the takedowns. The only problem was he didn't do anything with them. He didn't really get submission attempts. He didn't really try to get some strikes from the ground. Volkov not only reversed the first takedown in the first round, but outlanded him 38-17 in the round. So you outstruck him, and you made sure that the takedown he got didn't really last. He gets round one. Round two, Almeida got 3 takedowns and actually outstruck Volkov by 1 strike. Neither of them had a ton of strikes there, but still did enough to get that one, I think, and got round 2. Round 3, Almeida got another 3 takedowns, but Volkov continued to land from the ground. You look at the strike numbers, 77-17. 77-17, outlanded him by 60 strikes when he was in the top position for most of the round. Now, I get it that, you have a situation where if you're on the back, you're not really landing that much. I mean, you're landing, but it's not doing damage. So a lot of people don't really count those, but Volkov was doing his thing. Whether it was in the clinch fighting it off, whether it was on the feet, whether it was on the mat, the guy kept striking. And that proved to be the big thing because he gets the call on 2 of the judges' scorecards for that third round, and that is what puts him over the top. Now, Dana White says that he's glad that he got it that way. He thought that Volkov deserved it. He, got on Almeida for not doing enough, saying you can't lay and pray to get a win. Although, apparently he forgets Manny the Anvil's career in the UFC, where most of his wins would always be him talking about how he's going to beat the hell out of the guy, lay and pray on him for 3 rounds, and then say, oh, I'm sorry, I really wanted the fight to be better, but this guy wouldn't do anything as he was the one laying on top. But there have been guys who win that way, but, if they're going to change it up, and you're going to get a situation where if you get that takedown, it doesn't really count unless you do something with it, I'm all for it. I've been a proponent for a long time of giving guys credit when they just stop takedowns because you're stopping their game plan. Or if you get a transition, if you get back up, if you, don't stay down for that long, not letting the takedown count that much. If you're striking, if you're doing other things, if you're trying submissions from the bottom, that, you should get credit for those more than the guy who's just laying on top. So when I see a fight like this, well, it's frustrating because I had Almeida, and because you play what the judges do beforehand and then they change it up, it can be annoying, but I'm okay with it. I think that that's great if they're going to continue that further in all UFC fights where just because you're on your back doesn't mean you're losing. I'm all for it, and I like it. And let's see what we can do with that going forward. Then at light heavyweight, you had a battle between Alexander Rakic and Azamat Murzakanov. This was going to be an interesting fight. The 36-year-old Russian Murzakanov was unbeaten coming in 15-0. Rakic, the 33-year-old Austrian, had lost a bunch of fights lately. Lost his last 3 before this fight to Blachowicz, Prochazka, and Ankalaev. So all guys that were going title chasing afterwards. Would that be the same for Murzakanov? No, because obviously we talked about before this fight that you got Olberg waiting right there for the next shot at possibly Pereira, or maybe you have an Olberg fight against Prochazka because both of them won on the same card and are highly ranked if Pereira jumps up. So this wasn't going to put Murzakanov in that picture right away, but definitely going to raise his rankings and raise his status amongst the division if he did it, and he did. He gets the knockout in the first round, 3 minutes and 11 seconds in, despite Rakic having 6 inches of height and a 6.5-inch reach advantage. He had the power. He's not the long, lean, crazy in shape striker. He's kind of a little pudgy and shorter than a lot of these guys. We knew that coming in, but we knew he had the knockdown power. He landed more than 3 times the knockdown average of Rakic in his fights. So we thought he would do it here, and he did. Minus 120, he gets the win. We also, the fight ends by KO. TKO is minus one of our top picks, no matter who got it. We thought it was ending, and that's the way it did, so that was a great win by us as well. But the Russian caught him with a stiff jab late in that first round, dropped him. It wasn't even a big right, overhand right, wasn't a hook, uppercut, just a stiff jab, dropped Rakic to the mat. Murzakanov jumps right on him, and only really gets a few shots in because the ref jumped in quickly because he knew that Rakic was in trouble the way he went down and just covered right up. Now, Murzakanov is now 16-0, and he tried to say that he should be the top contender in this division, but as we discussed last week and just now, he's not. Olberg and Prochazka are before him. If you want to get a shot at one of those guys to prove you are the top of that division while the other one fights for the title, sure. But honestly, we might all be in limbo and, another situation where Jon Jones is holding things up with the UFC as they play these games. We'll see, but could be some great fights with some awesome, powerful knockouts coming in this division in the future, no matter how you play the Olberg, Prochazka, Pereira, and Murzakanov situation. 4 guys with some great power. We'll love to see how this goes going into 2026. The prelims weren't nearly as exciting because you mostly had decisions. There were some decent fights here and there, some good matchups. You had a heel hook by Walker in the heavyweight battle, 4 in a row for him. It's amazing. It's like Rousey, where you know what the guy wants to do, but you just can't stop it no matter what you try. So he's on a nice little run here in the heavyweight division. We'll see where he continues to rise in that one. But the one that really drew everyone's attention was right before the main card, that last prelim fight. You have Quillan Sakild with a nasty knockout over Nasrat Hakparest. Filthy head kick KO where his opponent just goes out cold, drops on his face, ref jumps in there right away, knows that it's over, no chance, protect the fighter, because a great knockout by Quill in there to really, stamp himself as a badass in the UFC as he continues to try to rise up into the main cards and into these rankings and get himself an even bigger, taste of what is going on in that division in the UFC. So to recap overall what we did on that card, we put out our favorite plays. Those end up 2-0 because, of course, the one of Aspinall getting the KO TKO is negated, voided by the no contest, but you had Jandaroba Dern going the distance we hit, -106. You had Rakic, Murzakanov ending by KO TKO that we hit at -110, so we did great there. Then on our other picks, Aspinall on the money line got voided. Nurmagomedov, money line, that's a win. Probably didn't bet it though because it was -650, but Nurmagomedov by points, -145, I'm sure you jumped on. That was a nice win. Both the Almeida ones cost us, the -215 on the money line and the submission win, +160. Both those fell because of him just laying and praying. But Murzakanov had a great win for us to really finish off the night there. -120 on the money line, as well as a +190 KO TKO victory. So great card for us with UFC 321 in the betting angles. Well, now we stay overseas where all the action happened last week for combat sports as we talk about BKFC 83, which had its own controversy over in Rome, Italy. Both the main event and co-main event go to decision, both end by split decision. If there's one thing that's worse than split decision, it's not agreeing with either one of them as I had when I watched these fights. There was some great action throughout the card, a lot of finishes until we got to the main events. And those ones ended in some serious controversy, which was just flat out ridiculous to me. First of all, the Cruiserweight champion was the main event, Chris Camozzi, Alessio Sakara. Of course, both these guys, former UFC fighters. Sakara, the 44-year-old from Italy, coming off a second-round finish over Eric Lozano in his first BKFC fight. Camozzi, the Cruiserweight champ, former UFC fighter, former PFL fighter, 4-1 in the BKFC, coming off a unanimous decision win over Andrea Bicci in Italy in April to defend his title. Camozzi was the favorite at -240. We thought he was going to get the win. I even had it by second-round TKO. He does not. Alessio Sakara gets the split decision win, 48-47 on two cards, 47-48 on one. And this was complete home cooking crap. Honestly, I don't understand how these judges scored this fight that way. Now, of course, Sakara came on late. I thought he won 4 and 5. I thought he was the better fighter in the last two rounds. But 1, 2, and 3 all went to the champion Camozzi. No one got knocked down to change the scoring. Of course, if you get dropped in the BKC's boxing rules, so it's 10-8 for one knockdown, 10-7 for two, and so on and so on. No one got dropped. So if you're just going straight 10-9 rounds on 5 rounds, and one guy wins 3 of them, he should win the fight. One judge had it right. The other two, obviously, playing the hometown favorite here in Sakara. Round 1, Camozzi was doing great in the clinch, using that tie clinch to throw some uppercuts to Sakara as he was coming forward, moving to avoid Sakara's shots. Sakara even went down in that round, but it was ruled a slip. Questionable. So by that scoring, it's 10-9 Camozzi. Could have been 10-8. Goes 10-9. Sakara comes forward again in round 2, but he's not throwing much as Camozzi is striking him from the outside. Sakara goes down twice in that one, both ruled slips and pushes. I thought the last one in that one could have been a clearer knockdown, as did Chris Lytle when he was doing the broadcast. So first round, okay, maybe it's a slip. First round, the second round, maybe it's a slip. Third round, you got to give Camozzi. That was a knockdown, which should have been 10-8. So 10-9 in the first one, 10-9 in the second round. Should have been 10-8, but Dan Murgliata gave it a slip. So up 2 rounds there. Third round, Sakara was throwing a little bit more as he's coming forward, but he's not landing a lot of them. Camozzi still is picking him apart from the outside. Sakara starts to land the last 10 seconds, but that's not enough to offset the rest of the round, unless you're one of these judges, apparently. So I gave all the first 3 rounds to Camozzi. The fourth round, Sakara started landing some good close uppercuts and hooks early in the round. Camozzi landed again in the second half of the fight, started picking him apart again from the outside, but I thought Sakara had the more powerful shots and the bigger shots, and with the higher volume, that was enough to win him the round, as opposed to the other ones where it was too late, too little. Now, round 5, Camozzi came out strong early on, throwing heavy volume to try to knock off Sakara's attack, but Sakara again landed some good tight uppercuts throughout the rest of the round. Had some strong finish at the end of the fight there as well, so I thought that he took that round as well, but again, no one went down. Sakara didn't get a knockdown to changed things. 3 rounds for Camozzi, 2 rounds for Sakara. No way in hell does Sakara win that fight if you're scoring it the right way. And in fact, Camozzi should have won it by more than 1 point because he should have gotten a knockdown in the second one that Murzakanov messed up. So I don't understand how these judges gave it to Sakara, except they're playing the crowd there because, of course, even though Camozzi has some good Italian roots and had the crowd in his pocket in April when he first fought there, Sakara is born and raised in Italy, so the crowd was completely for him in that fight. And the judges let it affect them. They let it change how they thought the fight was going. A couple of shots here and there all of a sudden made it look like to them like the round was in Sakara's hands in the third round because of the fans, and that's complete BS. Now we'll see what Sakara gets in his first title defense here with this belt. If we get a rematch with Camozzi, maybe in the U.S. where we get some hopefully better judging, or if he fights someone else, because honestly, his division's a mess. And that's why Sakara even got the title shot off of one BKFC win in the first place. Not just his name and it being in Italy, but just that there is no clear challenger otherwise. So we'll see if he gets a rematch against Camozzi or if he fights somebody else mixed and jumbled in that top 5 somewhere. Then you had a lightweight tournament battle between Ben Bonner versus Franco Tenaglia. Of course, Tenaglia, the Argentinian who makes his home in Spain now, was the former champion in this division for the BKFC. Ben Bonner, the current champion coming into this in the lightweight division, because while Tenaglia was still fighting and still part of the BKFC, he fought another organization, fought some MMA in Spain, so the BKFC stripped him. They don't like when you do that when you're a champion in the organization. So in comes Tony Soto versus Ben Bonner for the championship, and Ben Bonner went and ripped through Tony Soto, knocked him down each time in the first 2 rounds, got himself a nice win there in Texas. So he comes in there with the belt that Tenaglia wants back. We thought that Tenaglia would get the win by unanimous decision. Minus 143, he was the favorite slightly. We thought he'd get it. We thought it would go the distance, and it does. He ends up with a split decision win, 48-47 on 2 cards, 47-48 on 1. And even though we picked this one in the favor of Tenaglia, the judges got it wrong. Again, another split decision where they're kind of playing it up to the more local guy. Now, Tenaglia is not Italian. He's living in Spain, but I'm sure plenty of those fans came over to Rome to watch him fight and were in the house and making things happen, much more than the UK fans for Ben Bonner coming all the way down to Rome. So it worked out in the favor of Tenaglia. By my scoring, I thought he won the first round. Adi thought he won in the third round. I thought Ben Bonner won 2, 4, and 5. So once again, no knockdowns there to make it a situation where one guy wins 3 rounds, one guy wins 2 rounds, but somehow the rest flip it and give it to the guy who didn't win, in my book. In round 1, I thought it was definitely Tenaglia's round. He was stalking. He was catching Bonner, who was mostly circling out, trying to avoid the big shots, not really throwing much of his own. Round 2, I thought started out the same as Tenaglia. Then halfway through the round, Bonner found his range a little bit. He started to land some good shots. I gave him the slight edge there to take round 2. Now, round 3, both these guys get their shots in. The fans were kind of getting antsy with the first 2 rounds, thought that Bonner wasn't doing too much, wasn't getting in there. Tenaglia was getting frustrated as well. Well, round 3, Bonner starts to acquiesce and get in there and mix it up a little bit. Scorer tell him that he's got to do a little more, and he does. Lands some good shots early on, but then Tenaglia responds, and at one point, Bonner stumbles backwards. Then again, does it again. Even touched the mat at one point, but it was ruled a slip. I thought Tenaglia was starting to get him shook up. I thought he was starting to make him stumble. Maybe he couldn't get him a knockdown there as well, but they didn't. So then it goes to 10-9 for Tenaglia in that round to go up 2 rounds to 1. Round 4, Bonner was sticking and moving as Tenaglia was coming forward, and Tenaglia was throwing some big shots, but he was missing. So this time while Bonner was moving and doing his thing, I thought he landed enough shots to take that round, make it an even fight going to the 5th round, where Bonner started picking him apart. He was picking Tenaglia apart from the outside. He was avoiding Tenaglia's advances. Tenaglia was getting frustrated that Bonner was moving as effectively as he was and that he wasn't just standing and engaging right in the middle. So, you could see that Bonner was winning that round because Tenaglia was getting annoyed. So I thought that he took that round as well. So 2, 4, and 5 for Bonner. To me, no knockdowns. Clear victor, 48-47. Instead, you get it going the other way, as we said, to Tenaglia. One judge got it right. 2 judges don't know what the hell they were watching. Just because a guy's going forward and the other guy's going backwards doesn't mean the guy going backwards is losing. Judging 101. Yes, you're supposed to give some form of, a little bit of oomph because of a guy who engages more, but in those rounds, in 2, 4, Bonner was landing. In 5 especially, he was landing from the outside. So just because he's moving backwards doesn't mean those strikes don't count. He should have been the champion. Just because Tenaglia's walking forward and getting hit doesn't mean he's the guy winning the fight. And if you need a little bit more proof of that, go look at their faces after the fight. Now, that's not always the best indicator, but you can sure as hell look at those guys, look at the pictures of them standing there as they're ready to read the ruling of the judges and see that Ben Bonner clearly did more damage than Franco Tenaglia. So I don't know what the hell they're watching. As Tenaglia moves on, he's going to face the winner of Trout and Palomino. They're going to headline the card December 5th in Hollywood, Florida, we found out. So it's going to be interesting to see who Tenaglia gets out of that matchup. Of course, Trout beat Palomino at 165 already. Now they're rematching at 155, which is more of Palomino's natural weight, and allegedly more Trout's too. So it could work out well for both of them. It should be a great fight, but whoever wins that will now face Franco Tenaglia, despite Ben Bonner probably deserving to move on. Then at middleweight, you had Francesco Ricchi versus Joseph Hala. Ricchi, the Italian, makes his way in Florida now, but was born and raised in Italy, coming home to fight in front of his fans. The 31-year-old was 7-2 in the BKFC, coming off of back-to-back wins. Hala, the 30-year-old from Czech Republic, the Berserker, as they call him, 4-0 in bare-knuckle fighting, 1-0 in the BKFC. All of his fights in bare-knuckle fighting have ended by KO TKO, coming off a first-round finish in April in Italy in his last fight. We thought Ricchi was going to get it. Minus 594, he was on the money line. He was a big favorite and also had a big advantage in the reach. It didn't matter that he was 5 inches taller and 6.5 inches longer on the reach. Hala did what he had to do to get the third-round TKO 1 minute and 43 seconds into that round. Now, of course, there was some feeling out early because Hala had to get around that reach, but he was doing a good job. Both guys landing well. I thought Hala was doing a good job faking some shots in order to get Ricchi to react so then he could move in. It's almost like throwing combos where the first one was just a fake to set up the second and third one. And he did a good job of that. He was trying to get in there, landed some good shots on Ricchi, but Ricchi kind of backed him up with a jab in that fight as well in that round. So maybe it goes to Ricchi, maybe it goes to Hala, who knows, but Ricchi was talking some trash when he backed him up. Hala was throwing a bunch from different angles in round two to try to close that gap, get in there and do his damage. And he opened it up, found the way to get in there, landed some big shots halfway through the round that dropped Ricchi. Ricchi came out aggressive right after that, after the knockdown, but he gets dropped a second time right before the end of the round. So Hala in control of this one, and he continues. 40 seconds into the third round, drops Ricchi again. Later on, Ricchi tries to keep fighting. He doesn't want to give up. You're in Rome, having the heart of a warrior there, having the heart of a gladiator, but gets put down a fourth time with 40 seconds left in that round. He gets up just before the 10 count's over. It looked like, kind of Undertaker, kind of shades of Tyson Fury against, of course, Deontay Wilder in that first fight where he gets dropped on his back and then all of a sudden just rises up and continues the fight. It looked like that, but unfortunately for him, he didn't have the results of those two guys getting off his back because he tried to continue. It just wasn't enough. Right away, Hala jumps right back on him, and Dan Murzakanov steps in and says, "Nah, this is it. You're done." So now Hala gets the victory and also gets himself a belt. Apparently that was for the European middleweight title. I didn't know that before the fight started. They didn't have that up on the site, but apparently there is a European middleweight champion now, and his name is Joseph Hala, and he's a dangerous man. We'll see what's next for him in the BKFC, whether it's over in Europe or coming over to fight some of the tough guys in the U.S. At welterweight, you had a great fight between Jimmy Sweeney and Carlos Trinidad-Snake. Sweeney, of course, a long bare-knuckle career, not just in the BKFC, but in many other places. Had only had one fight in the BKFC where he went down. He lost a 6-round decision to Rico Franco in Italy back in April, so that was his first fight with the BKFC, going against Carlos Trinidad-Snake, the 29-year-old from Nebraska, who was 6-1 in the BKFC and coming off his own 6-round loss where he lost a split decision to Austin Trout, the aforementioned champion in this division, before he gave up the belt to drop down. Now, I thought it shouldn't have gone 6. I thought Trout pieced him up in 5 rounds and Trinidad-Snake barely threw. But it went 6. Now he's trying to get in there and answer the call and get himself back into the mix of this title picture. I thought he would. I had him by decision. I had him at minus 259 on the money line because he was going to have a big reach advantage. He does get the win by third round TKO, 18 seconds into that third round. First round, boring as hell. Sweeney was out with his hands up and just trying to get ready to block punches, like we saw with Ciryl Gane. Not a great style, not, very smart or danger. Not a great style, not really looking to throw. Obviously, you're just playing defense, really, and you always got to worry about the eye pokes there, especially with bare knuckles. But Trinidad-Snake kept coming, kept trying to keep the distance and throw some things here and there. I don't know who you give that round to. Either way, it ends up not mattering. Round 2, both guys are starting to engage more. They got talk 2 in the corner. They start to do some more stuff. Sweeney lands a good left, 45 seconds in. Trinidad-Snake comes forward and lands a good combo right after that. Sweeney answered with a left right after that. So standing and trading, mixing it up a little bit more. Then we get to the third round. Sweeney starts coming forward, and Carlos Trinidad-Snake catches him with a short left that goes right down the middle, right on the bridge of the nose, forehead, drops him right away. He's hurt, doesn't even try to get back up. Just pretty much one punch knockout there for Carlos Trinidad-Snake. What's next for him? He wants a shot at Julian Lane for that title. I mean, he's in the top of that division. Put on a good performance there against a very dangerous fighter. Not many in that division have really stood themselves out, but there could be some other guys that have a shot. We'll see. Could be in line for that, though. Carlos Trinidad-Snake, a great win over Jimmy Sweeney, putting himself back in the mix for possibly getting a shot at that belt against a new champion in Julian Let Me Bang Lane. Then at featherweight, you had a battle between Dan Chapman and James Get Down Brown. Brown, of course, from North Carolina, was going to be a much longer fighter, 11-inch reach advantage. And that was a huge factor in this fight. Chapman, the 35-year-old from Wales, was undefeated in bare knuckle coming in there after he got a first-round TKO win in Spain last October. But we're rolling with Brown, plus money, too. I don't know how he was an underdog in this fight with that huge length that he had. We thought he was going to get the decision because that's the way he likes to go. Doesn't make it all the way. Brown gets the win over Chapman by fourth round TKO 2 minutes in, because in the middle of the fourth to fifth round transition, Chapman's corner says, you know what? That's enough. That's done. I mean, throughout the fight, Brown was just keeping Chapman at distance while Chapman was kind of staying outside. Was looking for entries, but never really made a full commitment to getting them. Brown caught Chapman against the ropes late in the first round. He goes down, but it's ruled a slip. They check it out in the replay afterwards, in between rounds. Chapman starts to go down, and the ropes kind of catch him there. So he ends up with a knockdown there, Brown does, in the first round, 10-8 round for him. Chapman was chasing again in round two. Same kind of thing where he can't get in there. Brown throws a couple strikes here or there. Third, Chapman started getting more aggressive, knowing that time was running out on him, but he wasn't able to get in. And on fourth round, Brown starts chasing Chapman, turning the tables and beating him up from the distance throughout that fourth round. Chapman was standing while getting treated in between rounds. It didn't look like he was, particularly beat up. Didn't look like he was sucking wind or could barely stand. Wasn't on the stool, about to fall over. The guy was standing up, getting treatment, talking to his corner. But right before they called him back in there for the fifth round, his corner says, you know what? That's it. We're done. Nothing we can do here. Brown says he wants Kai Stewart. That Kai Stewart's running. He's got his belt and he wants his shot. I don't know if he gets it yet. He's unbeaten in this division, but of course has that loss to Howard H.G. Davis at lightweight. I think right now you got Rivera and Gaffey ahead of him in the rankings. Both those guys are also undefeated, so he might have to wait. We'll see Rivera again this weekend, of course, in this card in Michigan. And Gaffey, we saw him before Brown fought on that card over there in Rome. Nico Gaffey got the first round KO win, 1 minute and 13 seconds in there for the inaugural BKFC European Featherweight title. Again, another title we didn't know was a title fight, but he gets it. Both guys were throwing early, eating big shots. Not like Gaffey was dominating. He ate some good shots there from Zagers. But eventually, Gaffey catches him with a nice combo about 45 seconds into the fight, and drops him with a big left just over 1 minute into the fight. Zagers drops on his face, rolls over onto his back, and it's clear he's not even going to try to get back up. So a nice KO win by Gaffey to put himself even more up into that title picture in the featherweight division, as he now holds a BKFC European title. So does he bring that over against Kai Stewart? We'll see if that strap gets him the extra love there to get a shot at the champion in King Kai. All right, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, it's time for another call for transparency here. Last week, we called out the organizations and the fighters. We brought up the injury situation, how you have a lot of these guys going in there, not at full strength, and us as fans and bettors don't know what we're walking into when all of a sudden a guy shows up barely able to stand because he had norovirus, or barely able to walk because he got hit by a car, or had his arm falling off, or all these other things that are going on with fighters, whether they like it or not. We know they need to fight hurt sometimes. We know the organization doesn't want to lose fights. We want more transparency from them as fans, though, knowing what the hell is going on before these guys walk into the ring of the cage. Now, we need more transparency from someone else involved. And this time, it's refs and judges that I'm calling out. Because we had a lot of controversy in all three cards in combat sports last week. And a bunch of that stems from the guys calling the fight, whether it's the one calling the scoring or the one controlling the stuff in the ring. Okay, we talked about it, all three cards. Whether it's the eye poke by Gane that gets a no decision instead of a DQ, or not making the guy close his fist throughout the rest of that fight, whether it's the stoppage by the ref in there with Parker and Wardley when Parker was clearly still on his feet and should have been allowed to continue and try to fight through it, or it's the judges that screwed up both the co-main and main event on the BKFC card in Rome. We need more transparency. We need the refs and the judges to be able to stand behind their calls. We don't hear from them. We get the scores, we get the decisions, we get the stoppages. We don't get explanations. And we need that more because some of this stuff is just ridiculous. And I want to know how the hell they got to these conclusions that they get to. Most fighters have to answer after a fight. Now, of course, sometimes they go to the hospital and they don't, or some just try to avoid it and they'll take the fine. But after a fight, you have a press conference where you get a lot of these guys and girls, these fighters, these promoters going in there, taking questions from the press about what happened, what they were thinking, how things went. We need that for the refs. We need that for the judges because we're not getting enough clarity on what they're seeing. And obviously, sometimes it's way different from what we're seeing. You have that in certain other major sports. You have certain situations where you have a pool reporter that goes and talks to the umps or the refs after a game and tries to find out why they made the call they did. You have it where certain leagues, like the NBA comes out with their 2-minute report. Well, they'll break down all the calls that were made in the last 2 minutes of a game and whether they were right or not. Transparency saying, hey, the ref got this right, the ref got that wrong, should have went off bounce on this guy, that basket shouldn't have counted, all these things where you're trying to say, listen, we know you have discrepancy with the calls, and this is why this was called this way. We don't have that with combat sports. We don't get to hear from the refs and judges. They don't have a press conference telling us why they jumped in and stopped the fight when the guy was up 4 rounds and avoiding half the punches that were thrown at him. We don't have the judges sitting there and describing why they gave a round to someone who was clearly getting their butt kicked. And we need that. If it's not a press conference, at least a reporter or some statements put out by the commission afterwards, something. Maybe we get an after-action report from them where after the fight's over, they go back and watch it, and within 30 minutes to an hour of the fight, the card being over, you can say, okay, here's the reason, here's the press release of how they saw it, here's their explanation of why they scored it the way they did. Because we too often watch a card, watch a fight, and then afterwards saying, what the hell were they looking at, and have no way to know what it was. And too rarely are they brought to task. Too rarely are they commissioned, bring them in and say, okay, you rewatch this and tell me what you thought. Most times they just let it go. And even if they screw it up, they don't go back and fix it. And that's just ridiculous. And not only do we need to hear from them, we need some big changes. One of them, of course, would be retraining these guys every so often as these rules adjust, or when you see a situation where you know that something's wrong, the commission bringing them in and saying, hey, tell me what you thought. It would be helpful, of course, to also know who's judging a fight before it happens, because so many times you have a situation where there's certain judges and you know they're going to see things differently. They're going to see things weird. You find out at least the morning of, if not a couple days before in some of these leagues, who's doing what games. And there's accounts on social media dedicated to, well, this ref is calling this game. This is how he usually calls it. This NFL crew is calling this game. They call more pass interference. They favor the home team, things like that, so that you can know what you're in for as you get into a game. Why don't we know that before we get to the fight card about who's reffing what fights, who's the judge for it? Sometimes we know that with boxing and things like that. Sometimes they'll tell us as we are getting to the fight, but it'd be nice to know before we get involved with betting it or really getting locked into a fight or picking it, who's going to judge it and who's going to ref it, because then we might have a little bit different perspective on how things might go, or just know hell, it's not going to be what we see, and it's anybody's guess on how this is going to go. But what you really need, transparency-wise, with refs and judges, and I've been calling for this for a long time, open scoring. Because why is combat sports the only sport where we don't know how things are scored as it goes on? How do every other sport you watch, you see the scoreboard, you know where things stand. Combat sports, we don't. You can guess, you could assume, and in certain cases, you could be completely wrong. Why do we not have open scoring in combat sports? Especially now, again, not to play the betting angle every time, but as you're doing in-fight betting, you need to know what the refs are seeing to know what you think is going to happen the rest of the way. Because in a decision fight where you're going 3-5 rounds and you think you're going the distance, you need to know how they're watching it and how they're scoring it to judge what is going to happen the rest of the way and to get a better perspective before you go place your money. And if you're a fighter, you have your style, you have your game plan, you know what you're doing, and you're going through it thinking, well, this is working perfectly. This is exactly what I want. but don't know that the judges aren't giving you points for that? That even though you're marching forward, they're saying, well, the other guy's landing, so that's more important. Or while you're landing more and the other guy's marching forward, they're saying, oh, well, he's the one moving forward, even though he's getting his face bashed in, so we give him the points. If you don't know that in the middle of a fight, how do you adjust? How do you fix it? How do you fight a different way to give yourself a better chance? We need open scoring. 10 seconds after the round's over, boom, should pop up like a scoreboard. Here's the way the judges scored it. Here's the score as we stand now, going into second, third, fourth, fifth rounds. Or if you're in boxing, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12. Bring in open scoring. It makes it more transparent. It lets us see what's going on during, and it lets the fighters know where they stand. Because too many times we come in here and we go to a decision thinking it's a certain way, and all of a sudden you get scores read, and you see the guy standing there like, what the hell? Or you at home are saying, how did you see it that way? So we need transparency from these refs and these judges. We need to know what they were thinking, whether it's a press conference afterwards, whether it's a statement and a press release, whether it's one reporter asking them questions and then them explaining it. We need some answers. And we need to know as the fight goes on. Don't wait till the end to tell us that that guy's losing even though we thought he's winning. Give us opening scoring. Let us see where the fighter stands as it continues. For these men and women to be putting out as much as they are, to have some guy sitting in a chair ringside, cage side, calling it differently than what everyone else is seeing, it would do us a much better service to know where we stand as the fight goes on. To the fighters, to the fans, to everybody involved. Give us open scoring. Stop the drama so we can know what's going on as the fight happens. And then maybe we'll get a little less shocked and a little less pissed off when we get a decision read that just doesn't match up with what we've seen. Now, we had a lot of drama to cover here on this episode, but before we got into what we're going to see this weekend, before we finish up the show, there was a bit of news that came across the wire this week that I saw, and I said, oh my gosh, we got to talk about this. You got to be kidding me. And that is a potential rematch in 2026 between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. Did anybody ask for this? I sure as hell didn't. We saw this fight, and it was a historic fight. 4.6 million pay-per-view buys. $72 million live gate, both records for boxing and combat sports. Problem was that it was happened too late, first of all. Should have happened 5, 6 years ahead of that. But Floyd Mayweather was playing games and ducking Pacquiao when he was really in his prime and at his best. Then when it did happen and he was ready, he won by unanimous decision. But we found out after the fight that Pacquiao could barely fight. One of his arms was barely hanging on. The shoulder was all screwed up. He needed surgery afterwards. Shouldn't even been in the ring. So now, 10 years later, you want to run this back? A fight that we waited forever for, finally got, and we're completely disappointed by, and now haven't seen these guys basically for the better part of 10 years. Now, of course, Pacquiao has been back in there. The 46-year-old from the Philippines took a couple years off to go do politics and, play pro basketball over there and do other things. Came back recently and fought Mario Barrios for a title. I don't know how he got a title shot right away, but he did. Fought it to a draw. And there are a lot of people who thought that he got screwed. I wasn't one of them. I thought that he lost the fight. Shouldn't have been a draw. Should have been an outright loss. It should have been by a couple points. I thought Barrios didn't have a great showing, but he did enough to beat Pacquiao in my book. And I thought everyone seeing it as, oh, Pacquiao should be champion and doing great things, were just seeing it because it was Pacquiao and seeing it through the love that they have for this guy and not where he actually is at 46. Floyd Mayweather, he's 48. He retired in 2017 after that ridiculous show afterwards against McGregor to get to his 50-0, where McGregor didn't even deserve to be in the ring with him, destroyed him, and since has been doing exhibition bouts against reality stars and mobster grandsons. So why are we bringing him back? Allegedly, he was going to be back next year again for another one of these kind of fights, but against Tyson, which is just a ridiculous idea in itself. But they were talking about doing that. Now, this is a little bit more legit than that, but these guys fought 10 years ago, and I haven't heard anybody ask for it again since they fought. Once we got it and it was a complete disappointment, I don't think anybody won in seconds, except maybe these two as a money grab. And that's apparently what's going to happen. They're talking about putting it on Netflix and, about it being a big thing. We'll see if they do a pay-per-view out of it. But even if they don't, these guys are going to make tons of money off it. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, is it better than putting boxers in their 40s and 50s against Jake Paul and other guys? Sure. Is it better than having Jake Paul fight Tank Davis, who he outweighs by 60 to 80 pounds and is 8 inches taller than and has 9 inches of reach on? Yeah. Does that mean it's a good idea? No, I don't want it. Do you? I mean, come on. So it feels like we're getting all our fight ideas now in boxing, besides the great fights that we had, of course. You got to give Canelo and Crawford credit. You got to give some of these other guys, you had a great heavyweight fight, controversy, but still a good fight between Parker and Wardley here. There have been good fights in boxing, and we're still going to get more. But a lot of these biggest fights, a lot of the ones that are getting the most attention, are these ridiculous ones with Jake Paul. And I feel like now we're getting all our boxing ideas for the big fights that we're trying to do the big draws in to save the pay-per-views on by watching old Stallone fights. Because Paul versus Tank Davis, I mean, doesn't that reek of Rocky 3 when Stallone is fighting Thunderlips and Hulk Hogan when he's so much smaller than him? Or now Pacquiao and Mayweather, is that just us rehashing Grudge Match with him and De Niro when the old guys are, fighting years later to match things up? Now, of course, I think that one was they were going for a third fight. That never happened. This would be a second one. I don't know. The movie idea was so bad I didn't want to watch it. But now we're going to make it a living, breathing thing here with Pacquiao and Mayweather 2. Both these guys, first ballot Hall of Famers. Both these guys, some of the most incredible fighters I've watched throughout my love of combat sports in my lifetime. But I don't want to see them fight each other. I mean, I really don't want to see them fight at all at this point. I know Pacquiao's going to come back and try, and he looked decent enough, but I don't want it. Do you? Really? Come on. We do have some fights to watch this weekend. Of course, it is not the biggest cards, the biggest names. It's not a pay-per-view. It's not ones you're probably really getting too hyped for, but there should be some good action, should be some good fights, and ways to get involved here. I'm not betting the house on any of this, but I'll give you some angles here with the UFC Fight Night right now, and then the BKFC Fight Night later on. First up, UFC Fight Night at the Apex, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on Saturday on ESPN Plus is Garcia versus Onama. Now, not the most well-known fighters up and down this card. There are some who have some rankings, next to their names. Weirdly, the one with the highest ranked fighters is actually buried like halfway down the prelim card. And that's the women's bantamweight fight between number 3, Ketlin Vieira, and number 4, Norma Dumont. I mean, I kind of get that because neither of them are the most exciting fighters, these two Brazilians, but still, they are very highly ranked in their division. So them getting buried halfway down the card is a little weird. But if you're looking for some action on there, I mean, Dumont is the favorite, minus 166. Vieira is plus 130 as the underdog. My favorite bet may be that it goes the distance, or that ends by points, or, over the total rounds. None of those were up when I was taping this, but I think that we're going all the way with this one. Both their average fight times are right around 15 minutes. One is just under 15 minutes. One is just over 15 minutes. So it's a 3-round fight. I think it's going to be right around 15 minutes again. And I'm leaning towards Dumont, but the better play is probably going to be, depending on the odds, that this goes a distance or ends in points or something of that nature. Then the fight card is headlined by a featherweight battle between number 12, Steve Garcia, and number 13, David Onama. Garcia's won 6 in a row. Last was by decision, but 5 before that were by KO TKO. So a great striker, some nice power. Onama won 4 in a row in 6 of his last 7 fights. Last 3 fights were all by decision, though. He's gone the distance more. Garcia is the favorite at minus 138. Onama plus 108 underdog. I like Garcia, but I'm feeling the over 1.5 rounds at minus 112 a little bit more. That way, you got a little bit of leeway, a little bit of, depending on how this goes, whoever wins, you can still hit that. Because even when Garcia is getting the knockouts, it's not necessarily happening right away. So I'm going to take a chance. It goes over 1.5 rounds at minus 112. The under is pretty much the same odds, so they're not sure how it goes. I'm going to try the over. Heavyweight, you got number 6, Waldo Cortez Acosta versus number 9, Ante Delija. Now, Acosta had a 5-fight winning streak before losing to Pavlovich in August. Getting right back in there, though, here in October. Most of his fights have been decisions in that span. Now, Delija is coming in there, the former PFL fighter, with only 1 fight in the UFC, but still getting himself in the rankings. He got a win over Marcin Tybura. September, you get a first-round TKO victory. So again, another guy who fought recently, but getting right back in there here in the beginning of November, just over a month after his last win. I like Delija here, minus 128. I think he is the stronger, better fighter. Acosta hasn't been finished in MMA, but he was finished in boxing. So a lot less on the fist here protecting him. As he fights Delija, I'm going to take him by KO TKO to win this fight. Not sure the odds on him winning by KO TKO. We got to see as those come out, but him minus 128 is a pretty good bet as well. All right, before we finish up, there is one more fight card in action this weekend. The BKFC is fighting a fight night in Michigan, 8 o'clock Eastern on Saturday on the BKFC app, headlined by the Cruiserweight fight between Esteban Rodriguez versus Zach Camander. There's going to be fireworks in this one for sure. Camander, the former MMA fighter, is 2-0 in the BKFC with 2 quick finishes. Esteban Rodriguez, a.k.a. Mohawk, 4-1 in the BKFC, coming off back-to-back wins, including a 3-second knockout in his last fight. So don't blink, or you might miss what's going to happen in this one between these two bangers at Cruiserweight. Mohawk, I like him to win it by second round TKO. Cavender's badass. He's tough. He's big. He's strong. But you're going to have the whole crowd behind Mohawk here, and that guy is not going to disappoint his Michigan fans as he wins this one tonight. Then at featherweight, an important fight between Nathan Rivera versus Tommy Steerdom. As we said, Rivera in that mix there for a featherweight title shot. Now Steerdom fought for the title in his last fight. He got a shot at the belt against Kai Stewart, lost a dominant unanimous decision to Kai Stewart. The champ just picked him apart over 5 rounds. Rivera, on the other hand, unbeaten in the BKFC, 4-0, has won all of his fights, coming off a 4th round KO win over Alex Castro. Not necessarily the biggest names on his fight card yet, but he's proving himself a dominant force so far. Getting through guys, loves to be flashy, loves to go for the finish. Has made predictions before, putting envelopes under the chair of Dave Feldman before the fight, saying what he was going to do and when he was going to do it. And he's been proven right so far. We'll see if he can do it again. I like him by 3rd round TKO. Also on the card, you have the Dark Knight, Joseph Prier, Eric Lozano, and Justin Street fighting as well. So not maybe the flashiest card, but the top 2 fights should be pretty good. And some other names that you know sprinkled throughout as well in Michigan on Saturday night. All right, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Make sure you're liking and subscribing us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. Make sure you follow us on social media on Fighting Lines on X and on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're Fighting Lines Pod. Always love hearing from the fans, so make sure you reach out to me. Give us some comments, give us some questions, give us what you want to know about things going on in fighting, what you think about these fights, who your favorite fighters are, anything. Just reach out, get involved with the show. We love to hear from the fans. We'll talk to you next week where we're going to recap these 2 fight nights we have in both the UFC and the BKFC. And we have a UFC fight night to preview as well, another one at the Apex. We'll also hit some of the latest news in combat sports and maybe even look ahead at some of the big fights we have coming up down the line. Get a little bit of a look-ahead line, a little bit of early line betting preview to see if we can get some good value here with any of these fights we have coming up in the next few months to close out this year. And maybe even talk to a guest or two. We'll see what we can set up for you here on Fighting Lines with Brian Ciano. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you next week.